Heat and quantum physics. Namaste. Quantum physics is back to the center stage in the foundation as entanglement becomes one of the core principles of AI. Heat has its own general causality model, and there a conversation with quantum mechanics can be done. To do it, we have the founder of Heat, Dr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Why this conversation at all?
Artificial intelligence has brought this conversation back into the center stage. Conversation on quantum physics has always been there. Two central statements about quantum physics, ever since it was discovered, have been: one, it is weird, and two, it works. And this has always puzzled people. How is it that is so weird and yet it works so precisely? And nobody has been able to find out how the two are reconciled. Because all that quantum physics says is counterintuitive and counter experience to all of us. In our everyday life, we don't experience anything that quantum physics says there is. So let us go into what makes it weird, and then we can come to how what makes it weird has an explanation in heat. What makes quantum physics weird are 5 elements. The first is the discreteness of nature. That the fundamental building blocks of the universe are not continuous, but they come in packets. Second, double nature. That the electron has both the particle nature and a wave nature. Third is entanglement. That one electron here is entangled with some other particle at some other place, and whatever change you make to one, corresponding change in the other almost instantaneously happens, and it happens at such speed that it almost looks as though it's violating the speed of light, and there's no formal connection that we see between them. The next is superposition. The same electron can be at multiple positions at the same time. The next one is the observer effect. That somebody seeing or not seeing the electron's movement makes a difference to the movement. And last is, which is most weird, like entanglement. In fact, entanglement is so disturbing, Einstein could never wrap his mind around it. And he used to call it spooky action at a distance. And the last one is, some people have done experiments which are almost like triple slit experiments. And there what they found was something which is the most weird of all, that some electrons know some events which are going to happen in future. And corresponding to that, they change their present. Now, this is something the most weird of everything. Absolutely. So these are the 5 things which make it absolutely weird. Because in everyday experience, we don't experience any of these things. Which means that at some point, from the atomic level to the normal substance level, quantum mechanics collapses and the classical mechanics takes over. Because our experience every day is of classical physics, not of quantum physics. And yet, at the root, there is quantum physics. which means if you go at the very bottom, you have quantum physics operating. And then as you go more and more macro, from subatomic, you come to atomic, to molecular, to substance, crystal level, to substance level. And somewhere in between, quantum mechanics ceases and the classical physics takes over. And our experience largely is of classical physics. Now, what is interesting about it is that we are living in the age of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And quantum computing actually is going to power artificial intelligence and make it do far more than it can otherwise. And quantum computing at its roots is based upon two of these weird principles, that the same electron can be in more than one position at the same time. It can be in more than one state at the same time. And it can be entangled to some other particle. And the moment that particle state changes, correspondingly, this particle automatically changes its state. And these two are weird principles: the principle of superposition, of being at multiple points at the same time, and the principle of entanglement. And the whole quantum computing is based on these two principles, which is going to power our next generation of computers and artificial intelligence. And this is what brings the weirdness again to the popular center stage. That how is it that something so counter-experiential, counter-intuitive is at work on such a scale, and it works every time without fail. So this is how the conversation comes into the center stage at large. And there is a second aspect of it, that how does it connect to heat, which we will get into slowly.
That's what my second question was. How does it actually connect to heat?
It's very interesting. Heat is a psychotherapy system. It has nothing to do with physics per se.
Exactly.
And yet, some of the things that we say in heat, in principle, have been proved to be right by quantum physics. Not directly, but implicitly. For example, in heat, we have a general causality model. And there the idea is, how does any event happen at all? And we have a list of forces. That these are the 12 categories or 11 categories of forces, and they act upon some situation, and at the net result of it, an event happens. For example, let us say somebody faces a loss in early life and develops a personality disorder. So we put the same event, the event of trauma, in the general causality model, and we say, what are the causes which led to this trauma? And we will say the constitution of the person, the actions of the caregivers, experiences before the trauma, experiences after the trauma, long-term suffering of that person. How do we account for all of this? And we will say, in general causality model, we will say the self journey of the person. Did the person have by destiny a self journey that needed a personality disorder? Then we'll say the karma of the person. Then we will say the laws of science. Then we will say the free will of others, free will of the self, and so on we will go on. That all these factors lead to an event. Not that all the factors are active all the time, but some factors are active in every event. That's a general causality model. Now, in general causality model, we have something called free will of the self. that there is a free will of the self or free will of the other at work. That everything is not deterministic. If everything is deterministic, then where is free will? For example, if there is no observer effect, what we talked about in the weirdness of quantum mechanics, there is an observer effect.
Right.
So there is no observer effect, which means everything is deterministic. If all the weirdness of quantum physics is taken away, it becomes a deterministic system.
Hmm.
And we are comfortable with deterministic systems. What we call weirdness is a break of determinism. Now, if there was no observer effect, it was a completely deterministic system, there would be no place for free will, which means the general causality model will break down. But what we see here is everything is not deterministic, it's highly probabilistic. And there are forces which govern that probability. The probability is not random. It's governed by some forces. And those forces themselves are variable in their intensity. So what we see here is just as the quantum system is not a deterministic system, similarly, heat system is not a deterministic system. It has a lot of free will. Free will of self, free will of others, free will of suprahuman beings, grace, freedom, chance accidents. All of these are non-deterministic elements. So the non-deterministic element of heat is seen in quantum physics. Then you have in heat system a very important variable called journey of the universe. That the universe has a fixed journey. And if something is trying to accelerate it beyond a point, that event is not allowed to occur. Which means there is a future which is fixed, not 100% fixed, but there are parts of future which is fixed. All of future is not destined, but some points in future are destined. And whenever an action of the present collides with that destined point of future, the present action is not allowed to happen.
Hmm.
Which means there is a retrospective effect of future on the present.
True.
It's not only the present creates the future, but the future also creates the present.
Fair enough.
Now that is what we see in the three-slit experiment in the quantum physics. That somehow the electron knows what is going to happen in future and correspondingly adjusts itself. Which means in heat terms, the program of the universe has fixed points in future and correspondingly present events are retrospectively affected. There is a retrocausation. Causation in the present induced by the future, retrocausation. So that again is...
Isn't it that because we create the dimension of time there, that's why it doesn't seem like a unidirectional way where it is just moving ahead? It's because of the dimension of time which we consider it as retrogressive in nature, or quantum physics doesn't talk much about the time as a dimension.
No, it does. In fact, there are two different parts here. One is the arrow of time and second is the arrow of causation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Arrow of time would mean, can you go back into the past
Hmm.
and see it as it was?
Hmm.
Or can you go into the future and see what is going to come?
Hmm.
That is the movement on time.
Hmm.
But what we are referring to the second aspect of it, the
Of the
arrow of
position.
causality. Usually we believe that what we do in future will determine what we do in the present will determine our future. But we don't have an idea that certain things in future are destined and they also dictate the present.
Hmm.
For example, let us say there are some people who are extremely good leaders today.
Hmm.
If they become presidents of some powerful countries, they can rapidly change the world.
Hmm.
But destiny does not allow that kind of rapid change. It has its own program. So they will never be allowed to be leaders or be successful. Now, this
Hmm.
is very difficult to swallow. Present determining future, we all accept. But the future determining present is something counterintuitive. And it also takes away the freedom that the future is a blank canvas. It's not a blank canvas. It is a largely blank canvas with fixed dots which cannot be moved. So this again is where a heat principle which we arrived at experientially and intuitively is being empirically proven. I mean, look at the way the principles are arrived at. In heat, we are arriving at just experientially and intuitively.
Right.
And in quantum physics, everything is experimental. And yet similar things are proven. And this also creates another aspect of the idea of reality and the idea of human integer, how we are constituted. Like we talk about in heat of different bodies, the physical body, the energy body, the emotional body, the thought body, the karmic body. And corresponding to this, the 7 zones of reality. That there is a zone in the universe which is material, there is an astral zone, there is a emotional zone, a cognitive or thought zone, and a karmic zone, and so on. Now this does not reflect in quantum physics per se, but some people in string theory talk about it. And some people talk about gravity diffusing away somewhere. That's a very weak force. Of all the fundamental force, it's a very weak force. One of the idea they give is that maybe it's diffusing away in some dimensions we don't know. Now, that's a speculative thing. We don't know if it's correct. But what is happening is the zones of reality that we talk about and the dimensions that string theory talks about, or the membranes that they talk about, we don't know whether that membranes refer to those zones or those dimensions refer to those zones, but a kind of zone of reality very different from our zone and yet connected to our zone is something which is emerging from there. And that is very much a part of it. So these are some of the areas where what intuitively and experientially we arrived at in heat, something parallel or something very near to it is being found in quantum physics. And that gives us some sort of assurance that probably we are not completely off track. And what we are looking at in a macro way is finding a process explanation in quantum physics.
So, if we see AI and if we see quantum physics, these are very recent time understandings of sciences. What about the ancient spiritual views on these kind of mechanisms?
He takes a lot of its knowledge from ancient scriptures or spiritual schools. They were very clear about it. Like different time zones, that time flows differently in different parts of reality. Or there are extraterrestrial beings. Or that everything at the most fundamental level is a vibration. Or that there is a interaction between consciousness, energy, and matter and force. And consciousness itself is a force. In fact, Sri Aurobindo calls it consciousness force. He uses a full word, consciousness force. So the ancients were very clear about what we have in heat. What is surprising is the quantum physics is slowly discovering some parts of it. Now, we don't know whether it will end up proving everything, proving nothing, proving some parts and disproving some parts. That is for the future of science to see. But as this discovery is happening, it leads to excitement. That something that we thought in a macro way is getting empirical support.
So, on what points you see heat and quantum not yet together?
Uh, they are together when it comes to retrocausation. They are together when it comes to observer effect. They are together when it comes to entanglement, because that's also an interesting area. Like when we experience what the patient feels, being away from the patient, no way that sensually using any of our senses we can make out. And what we explain that by referring to astral cords, or what we say the mirror neurons, or what we call empathy, identifying with the other. It may involve at a quantum level some sort of entanglement. That something in the brain is entangling with something in the other's brain, and therefore changes in him are felt in changes in us. And somehow we have developed a apparatus to recognize those changes and analyze it. So these are common things. So these are common things between heat and quantum mechanics. Now, what is not common? What is not common is the idea of soul, the idea of suprahuman beings and forces, the idea of principle, the idea of reality. These are not common between them. These are strictly in heat, but not yet in quantum physics. Because quantum physics essentially is coming out of a modern materialist paradigm. So it is still not incorporating these things. So these are the differences. One more idea is of how does the micro go to the macro? And we do not know if there are emergent phenomena in between. So when we talk of quantum, we implicitly accept some sort of a emergent phenomena where it ceases to be quantum and gives it over to classical. That kind of emergent phenomena we have not actually conceptualized in heat.
In heat, you also talk about the karmic aspects. So, how does karma come in?
In heat, it is very clear that the constitution of the person, the way his free will operates at times, the way he gets results based upon his efforts, the way he is entangled or free, the way insight happens or does not happen in therapy for a long time, and suddenly you do the same thing and insight happens. Something you did so many times, the thing happened and now it happens. At times, the person leaves therapy, some event happens, he just calls you up, talks to you, and that event happens. And he feels healed. So, one way to look at it is that the karmic load is now taken care of, and now insight and healing can happen. That is one way to look at it in the heat model. Now, in the quantum model is something interesting. That just as you have a retrocausation, can you have a past causation? That the electron which is coming in is coming from somewhere. And either it is the past of the observer or its own past in some way. That is something that we still don't know at a most fundamental material level. How does the past determine the future? And we are not talking of the past of the system, the starting condition of the system, but something much before it. how does it operate? For example, let us say a man has a karmic thing that he is destined to lose 10,000 rupees somewhere, which means he would have thoughts to go to that place and play and lose, which means something will happen in his mind. So at the material level, how is the karma getting into the mind or the brain and making it happen? That kind of past acting on the atomic level, that is something the quantum world has not yet taught us.
But in quantum world and with this model social media, they talk a lot about these pattern repetitions, how to break free your patterns, which also they sometimes associate with the karmic patterns. Can you say something more about it?
Yes, because two things are common
Mm.
between psychotherapy and quantum. Of course, I'm not establishing an equivalence, I'm just
Mm.
making a kind of a name dropping here. That the act of observation makes a difference.
Mm. Mm.
At an atomic level, the act of observation makes a difference. And if you look at psychotherapy practices, again, we talk of the observing ego and the participating ego. And the
True.
act of observation produces insight and change.
Mm.
So
Mm.
again, we have at the macro level the same phenomena repeating. That the act of
Definitely.
observation introduces a change in the system. That the observed changes based upon observation.
That
Observe,
even in spirituality, we believe that with the drashta bhav, the observer, when
correct,
it witnesses, there's a shift.
correct, correct. So observation brings about a change in the observed.
It
That
is
is
the involvement of some level of consciousness because observer is not just being watched, but there is some consciousness being involved.
correct. The observer is not only watching, but there is a hidden intention of the observer.
Right.
That also has a force of its own.
Hmm.
There are very few people who would introduce change by pure observation without intention. Some people do. Like Krishnamurti's method is precisely this, what he calls choiceless self-awareness.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That, and Vipassana also you do this, that there is no intention. You just keep watching and whatever happens, happens. But most of the times, the observation is given as a spiritual practice in order to bring about a change.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And there is an intention hiding along with the observer. That the observer is observing very intently the observed in order to bring about a change.
So the intention can be a conscious choice or an unconscious phenomena there of observing.
More often, it's a conscious choice
Mm.
because you are taught Sakshi Bhav and then you practice it. So it's a very, very conscious effort. It's not an easy thing to do, it's high energy consumption. If you try,
Yeah, when you acquire it as a skill, it does. But there are many people who have done in their past lives are probably they're gifted in a
right,
simpler way.
right.
Mm.
So for them, it's easier, but for most, it is draining. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, somebody trying to observe, you will observe that within few minutes, he gives it up and comes back to the normal state of being overwhelming participation. That's much easier. It's much easier to get lost than to find oneself.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of observation is there. Why did we come here?
We talked about the patterns, what the karmic patterns and manifestation patterns or the psychological patterns, repetition loops people get stuck in. How do we relate these?
Correct, correct. So when the karmic load is over, only then the insight happens or the observation is done to get results. So one thing common between the two is that observation changes the observed system, observed part
Mm.
of the system, let me say.
Mm. Mm.
That is one part. The I'm losing something. Why did we come to this point?
We while we were I asked you about the karma, how does it play? Then I also asked
Correct,
you.
correct. I got it. So then
Right.
the whole thing is about the past of how the karmic thing will influence at the material level something to create an action, a thought or a
Hmm.
thing or action.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
something that quantum is not yet giving any insight on that part. But in heat, it is very, very clear. In spirituality, it's very clear. And some schools of spirituality which believe in certain fixed points in the future actually not only just believe in it, but they depict the historical ages based upon it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in India, we have this entire Yuga theory. And corollary to that, some people, even in the cycle of a Yuga, draw micro periods of ages, each age with its own spirit. The spirit of
Okay.
the age is different. And that spirit of the age also puts a flavor as well as a constraint on what can be done in that age.
You use the word spirit. I usually have this context in my mind of the archetypes of the yugas.
Correct. It's a very good idea that each yuga has its own archetypes.
Right.
It's true. Very true.
Uh, when we talk about quantum physics, we usually refer to something very fundamental to the existence itself, which is very similar to a layman thinking about the root cause or the causality. So, how does causality picture change from quantum to heat? What is the process there? What is bringing in the transition if we have to transit between the two, or
Right.
rather, bridge between the two?
So there are two parts here. One is the quantum causality essentially is causality of the physical plane.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because the idea there is that at the root, everything is only physical. We are dealing only with matter, force, and energy, nothing more. And therefore, the type of causality which they will come uh, out with will always be in terms of physical nature.
Very elemental and very physical.
Yeah, because the idea is that there's nothing except this. There is no belief as yet, scientifically speaking, on emergence. It's kept as a possibility, but not as a principle.
Hmm.
You can have an idea that matter comes together and then something miraculous happens and life begins. Then life goes on, something miraculous happens and mind begins. So this miraculous can be an emergent phenomenon. Now that is something which is not yet a scientific principle, it's only a kind of possibility. So at present, the core idea is that there's no emergence, it's just straight bottom up matter rearranging itself in various ways. So it's
Hmm.
just a play of matter, energy, and force.
Hmm.
So in that context, the causality also will be only that.
Hmm.
It will be articulated only in terms of some physical forces or physical phenomena. But in heat, we are into emergent phenomena. That it is not just matter, but there is consciousness which is distinct from matter and energy. Yeah, you're saying something.
I'm still not clear about what I'm going to ask. The thing is, like, so quantum physics to begin with sounds more like a philosophical phenomena until unless we are getting to the physicality of it.
Right.
So that's very paradoxical in nature,
Hmm.
having this or that, or rather this or that. So that's what is quite confusing here when we are bridging it with heat.
Correct. That is true. In fact, within the within the scientific community itself, some people today very strongly believe that something is wrong with quantum physics.
No. Uh-huh.
And in the last 50 years, there has been a central attempt to bring together relativity and quantum physics, which they don't come together.
Mm-hmm.
This is an enterprise of the last 50 years trying to bridge relativity and quantum physics, which does not come together. And there are two opinions. The majority opinion is that uh, you have to quantize gravity. And the second opinion is that you have to relativize quantum physics. That you anchor in Einstein and then try to bring something together and somehow bridge the gap. We don't know what will come up, but some people genuinely believe that it is wrong, that there's something difficult about it. One of them is Roger Penrose.
Okay.
So if you see his videos, he says something is wrong there. But the strange thing is that it works.
Just like psychoanalysis. It works.
Correct. I think that also both of them share.
True.
Both are mystical, both are strange, and both work. So, sorry.
So how does it go forward from here then? Saying to the causality and then taking
Yeah.
it.
So I was talking about causality. That
Mm-hmm.
in heat, you have multiple causalities. It is not only material causality. Like when you say an event happens, how does an event happen? So one of the categories there is laws of nature. Now that is the only category that quantum physics will agree.
True.
All other categories quantum physics will not agree. So that's the common thing. That both of them share one category why events happen, which is laws of nature. But other categories of heat, like free will of the self, karma of the self journey, suprahuman forces, suprahuman beings, program of the universe, free will of others, karma of others, self journey of others, chance, grace, freedom. These are also categories which lead to events. These are the categories which are still not there in quantum physics. So in that sense, the causality model in heat is far more multifactorial compared to the causality model of quantum physics, which is much simpler compared to that of heat. And the reason is that we are looking at a very different picture of reality. Therefore, we have a very different causality model.
And how do we build them ahead from here on? When we move ahead after the causality, do we explore the other existing phenomena of science in heat?
Yeah, because what we'll have to do is to find the empirical grounding of each of the categories. And that is more likely to come from parapsychology than from quantum physics.
Okay.
Because these are strictly subjects of parapsychology. Many of these areas that we are talking about. But what will happen is, while they will be discussed in parapsychology, something parallel to what they are saying will be found in quantum physics. But the quantum physics problem will be that they will not go macro and take a leap. They will keep themselves to the most elemental material world and not make a claim that what is true at the elemental material level is also true at the macro level. Nobody is going to use a quantum mechanics principle for sociology or psychology. It's too macro for that. It's a long, long way before slowly the micro becomes macro, more macro, and comes to this kind of large-scale sciences.
It's falling into the controversy again.
Correct. So this micro to macro.
Has anybody attempted ever?
What part?
On bridging between these two, quantum and psychological, parapsychological phenomena? Because there are many gadgets they have created considering basic things of quantum, and then there's a lot of gadgets where they see this paranormal activities, they can catch certain frequencies. So
Nobody in the scientific realm, but new age healers have done it. So there is a very famous book called Quantum Healing, where there is a famous doctor in Hollywood. He is an Indian. I forget his name. But I'll send it across. So he has done this kind of thing of trying to put together quantum mechanics and neurology and well-being. This other person, he has created the org theory of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
There are two people there. I forget the name. One is Roger Penrose,
Mm-hmm.
and one is a doctor in anesthesia.
All right.
Because anesthesia is a very interesting discipline in terms of consciousness.
True.
That you lose awareness of a part of you and you regain awareness based upon a substance given to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes into the very fundamentals of how do you get any sensation at all. And what he does in org theory is he says in the neurons there are nanotubules,
Mm-hmm.
and in those nanotubules there is a quantum phenomena at work,
Mm.
and that is the basis of human consciousness.
Oh,
That
interesting.
is how they are taking quantum mechanics to neurology and
Okay.
thereby connecting it to consciousness. That in the neurons are the cells or tubules, in them are particles, and in those particles the quantum phenomena is on.
Fascinating.
So that is how they take. It's a very popular org theory of consciousness, ORCH. I don't recollect the full name, but it's ORCH theory of consciousness.
Considering heat, where it talks about the chakra healing. Now, the chakra healing parts are very much talking something like something. It comes up like there's some frequencies, there's some energies. So, how do you relate the heat chakra and quantum together?
Uh, Two things we can say. One is whatever material is associated with any chakra, in its most fundamental working, if it is a physical material, meaning matter, energy, or force, it cannot escape quantum mechanics. So the moment we start studying the chakra scientifically and we go deeper, someday we will encounter quantum phenomena in the chakras. That is one part of it.
What is your take on that? Because um, for a living being, the chakras behave very differently, while for a person who has left the body, the chakras dissolve certain
Yes.
chakras.
That is where the emergent phenomena comes.
Exactly. So the quantum can be something which can actually create more sense to this chakra theory, or rather, quantum has itself taken some concept from there.
Uh, what one can say is the second parallel can be that when one explores the inner world, one finds vortices of energy. And those vortices of energy, which intuitively you can feel, experientially you can feel, but not prove empirically, they may have possibly some quantum phenomena at work. What it is, we don't know. But experientially, we do see vortices of energy. And these vortices of energy are common to many states of matter. Or
So
sorry,
what?
many
So
states
I
of
was getting on
systems.
those lines when we talk about the part of the change in the behavior of the particle as a wave when an observer is there. Similarly, there is a change in the frequencies energy when the conscious being is there, when there is a life. So that is also very elemental to one's existence.
Yes. The same matter operates very differently with and without life. That is.
Hmm.
So these are esoteric areas which is still we are still knocking the doors, but it's interesting the way things are shaping up. That what we never thought will find any parallel is now finding parallels.
And how do you see, will there be ever nearby future something with spirituality? Because there's a lot of people who are questioning about this quantum physics being connected to spirituality and mysticism, along with these other sciences which are not much talked about. There are a lot of experiments going on with crystals. There are a lot of experiments going on with plants to understand the behavior. Then comes homeopathy, which also takes some elemental versions of things. So how do you see this in a holistic view? Quantum, heat, homeopathy, frequencies. What's your take on that?
It's a large landscape, which is the science of the future. Because what we have are very different and radically separate ideas. And if some unification has to happen, it can happen at two places, or maybe two places separately or simultaneously. Either at purely quantum level, or purely at consciousness level, or at both. Because what we see is jigsaw puzzle. You will have one area which is of psychedelics, which is giving you altered states. You will have a second idea where strange ideas are found in quantum mechanics, especially of entanglement, because it's a very strange idea. And that reminds us of Freud's interest in telepathy, because Freud was very much interested in telepathy. In fact, if you look at collected works of Freud, there is an article on telepathy. But he was persuaded by his colleagues not to pursue it further, so that psychoanalysis does not lose the scientific rigor. And Freud says if he was to live all over again, one thing he would do differently would be to pursue telepathy.
Oh.
And the way he started was that counter-transference or transference was very telepathy. That at times the patient tells you very clearly something about the transference. At times he behaves, but at times he does neither of it. Neither he uses words, nor he behaves in a way, but you start having feelings of counter-transference.
It comes very distinctively, just like intuition would land.
Correct. In projective identification, you get it. And so Freud felt that this transference and projective identification may have a telepathic basis. Just because somebody is in front of you does not mean telepathy cannot happen. I mean, we have an idea that telepathy should happen only at distances. But the same process can happen at short distances also. And this happens in long distances also, where you start feeling something that the patient is feeling. What we call transmission by astral cords. Or some people say there is an unbroken consciousness which is everywhere. And therefore entanglement happens. We don't know what the truth is, but the entanglement part is another part of the puzzle. The parapsychological component is the third part. The mystical and spiritual components are the fourth part. And what we are looking at it is a trying to combine these things into one. Now,
when you talk about this network, I'm reminded of just the way nobody ever thought in the current times that there would be all 5Gs, 3Gs, 4Gs tower all around, which would be conducting. You can send away pictures, videos, sounds, and now we find it very difficult when we think how can tele takes place, and this is what telephone reminded us with the same term tele.
So, yeah, and what was magic at one point is now everyday routine. Like what we are doing today was magic at one point in time.
So there is a very conducive network of something existing which channelizes all these tele and transferences.
Correct. This is a very important point with this, and I'm glad you brought it out. One of the things that quantum physics points to is the possibility of reality being an organic whole. That there is no disjointedness, it's an organic whole system.
Absolutely.
That is what it also talks about. That we are organic parts of the system, not disjointed, isolated, independent entities who are interacting with the system. We are not interacting with the system as independent agents.
Nothing is happening in isolation. Absolutely.
So that is also something that is common between the two, that both are somehow pointing out towards some sort of an organic holism.
So, heat, pathogenesis, and holistic healing gain from and add to quantum physics and science in general. So, enriching discussion, leaving us with ideas for enduring contemplation. See you all again. Namaste.